I was going to say, if you want to go learn a language, like what is the process you normally take now?
If I'm learning a language, typically I go straight to just trying to build something.
Mm.
Like I have enough of the core concepts down that I can, any C-based language I can effectively run with it. And now any functional language, I at least have some concept of kind of what they're about. I
Hmm.
did a little bit of OCaml. Uh, tried to build a little bit of some web stuff with OCaml, just like barely trying to figure it out. But nonetheless, and did some advent of code. But typically, I just try to solve stuff, build real stuff, because like if you were telling me, hey, you need to go learn C sharp, right? Like I'm pretty sure I could learn C sharp really
Yeah.
quick, right? I could just get up there. Okay, how do I start a server? Okay, this is how I start a server. Let's try to come up with a good project. Okay, here's a good project. Let's actually build something. Let's
Mm.
build a good CLI tool to parse out all these logs and figure something out with
Mm.
it. Like that's to me, that's at this point, that's the best way. And then I like to go after I kind of get the basics down and kind of understand it. Then typically I'll go buy a book on it and
Mm.
like read through what they did. So that way I already have this like really practical foundational knowledge. And I'm like, oh, I can see why I was totally doing that wrong. This is way cooler. Okay, this is way cooler. Because often if I read first, I just miss out like on a lot of that. Like I don't have that like heart change. Like, oh, I understand why they do it this way because
Right.
you know, I just don't have that experience. So it just means nothing to me.
I imagine that is especially true if, like, the first time you started doing functional, where it's a whole different paradigm of program where you can, like, see what it's being written there, but the concepts are not going to stick because it's just such a different way to write the code. I
Yeah.
myself have never actually done functional programming. I know there are a lot of people that are very dedicated on functional, and this is the greatest way to write code. Like, OOP is the worst thing ever created. What is the appeal of functional? Like, obviously, you said you not like the most experienced at
I
it, but
touched it.
yeah, from what you've seen,
I
what is the appeal?
Well, I would say there's some constructs that are super nice in functional. A lot of pattern matching. Like Elixir, a really cool thing Elixir has is that you can define a function many times, kind of like function overloading, except for instead of like arguments you're taking in, it's the shape of the argument you're taking in. So I'm going to define, say, foo,
Uh-huh.
and it takes in the empty array, and I'll
Right.
do the case with empty array. Then I'll redo foo, but it takes in an array with one element. And I'll do the thing with one element. And then I'll do foo with the general array case and then program that one. So it's
Uh-huh.
kind of like it strips the if statements out and brings it up into a language level construct. And to me, that's super, super cool because you're pattern matching on the function and you're like defining how this function will be called at a language level, like how your array will interact with it. And so that's like super duper cool to me because that's a lot of things that I want,
Mhm.
which is I hate functions with a bunch of if statements. But if I could actually just put the shape inside the function, then it's like I can define that case and it's like so easy to understand this case. The empty case looks like this 3 lines of code. It's so clean. It's so obvious. It's not somewhere within wherever I decided to handle the 0-line case, right?
Mhm.
And so for me, there's like a lot of cool concepts. Obviously, partial application, being able to you have a function that takes in 3 parameters, A, B, C, and I go foo and I pass in 5.
Mhm.
Out comes a function. This is like an OCaml, and that function has 5 curried in it. So when I call it with B and C, 5 will already be auto applied to that new function that I had pop out of it because it's been partially applied. The function hasn't been fully like I don't know all the right terms. I'm not a functional bro.
No, I
Like
don't know the
said, I
terms
don't
either.
have a lot
Use
of
whatever term makes sense.
I don't have a lot of experience yet, but I think that's like super duper neat because then you can define these functions. It's like in JavaScript, if you were to do this, you would define a function, say, like you wanted to do a timer.
Mhm.
And so you wanted to create an ability that is a function that returns a function that is a timer. So then I can pass in 5 minutes into the first function, and then it returns a function for me that will be the 5-minute timer every single time,
Huh.
right? So that's kind of like what you could do in OCaml, except for you would just simply have one function, and the first parameter is the time, and then I call it with just the time, and out comes a function that's now locked into that, and will always have that time come in as the first parameter. So it's like, oh, that's super cool. Like
Hmm.
that's a much like that's just I can't describe that in JavaScript. I have to write a function that returns a function. You just write a function and it just is automatically a part of the language. It's just different. And OCaml also like OCaml is super cool in a sense that if you wanted to add 2 numbers together, you'd use a plus sign. If you
Right.
want to add two strings together, you'd use a caret. If you want to add two floating points, you'd use a plus dot, which means that by the syntax of what you're doing, it can infer every single type. And it actually is a fully typed language. It is type safe. It will actually, it actually is fully inferred. You can specify your type, but you virtually never need to, because it just knows by how you're using it exactly what's going on. And so you will create a function that's like function A plus B. It will go, this is an int function. That's what you want. Int returns an int, because I can tell because of the syntax used here. And so it's like, wow, that's pretty cool. So when you try to call it with a float, it's like, you can't do that. You can't provide a float here. This is not a float function.
Right. That sounds really cool. I'm not like you have these language concepts where it's like, this is a neat idea. I'm not sure like where I would realistically apply them, but I kind of want to go learn it now. Like,
yeah, there's a lot of recursions. You got to be like really into recursion as well.
I have a whiteboard
They obviously have tail call optimizations. Yeah, they like. I mean, if you know recursion, it's not hard to at least see it, but to always reach for recursion as opposed to like thinking in loops is really hard. Right. And so I kept finding myself having to be like, okay, so how do I shape this function to solve the problem? And so I still, obviously I just didn't do it long enough to become good at it. It's an obvious neural pathway I do not flex. Therefore, it is weak.
Right.
It is very, very weak.
No, that's a really cool concept, and I just want to go try it out now.
Yeah, Rust is a good middle ground. Have you programmed any Rust?
I've not done Rust yet. I've been meaning to for a long time.
It's a good middle ground because you get iterators and options and results. So you get the sum types and all the fancy terms that functional programmers use.
Yep.
But you can also just do a for loop. And so it's like you kind of get, it allows imperative programming to just exist. And so it feels very nice. And so, because I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, procedural / imperative programming is just the easiest, I think, for all humans to understand.
Yeah.
Because you just read from top to bottom and it just goes like this. Functional is very, swirly. It looks like the Emacs learning curve, right? It's very, you got to you're looping on yourself a bunch, which I think just makes it different. But people swear by it, which makes me still so curious. I feel like I need to do more of it, because how can people be that excited? It confuses me, right? There has to be something there I'm missing because I haven't used it long enough to become actually good at it.
To be fair, people were very excited about object-oriented programming when they first started doing that. So,
okay, fair. That's fair. This is fair. I mean, I was a part of the clean code. I was all in it there for a while.
My entire start of programming was Java, and then Python doing. Actually, please, for the love of God, don't ever write OOP in Python. It's the most disgusting. Use any other language. It is the worst syntax for OOP you will ever see.
I did use a lot of it, and it's slow. It's crazy slow. It's not just like, it's like 10% slower. No, it's like an order of magnitude slower than just writing dictionaries or whatever and using functions. It's incredible how slow it is.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. I built a parser in it, and it was taking like 10 minutes. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? Threw in a couple functions, and it took like a second. I was like, dude, this is a racket. Like, this is wild. What is happening here?